Current focus in chapter 18. This again is a compound figure. It's quite complicated, so we'll break it down into its separate component parts. And this was from a paper published by Boris Worm and co-authors, which appeared in Science in 2006. It's a very important and influential paper, and there's a huge amount of work that has gone into it. Basically, what they were trying to do was to show the importance of diversity or biodiversity in supporting and promoting ecosystem services such as production. Now, in panel A and B, what they've done here is presented the results of a meta-analysis of studies that have looked at the response of high diversity versus low diversity treatments, and they've measured the response in terms of the output of some ecosystem process such as production. And these experiments cover a wide range of different types of organisms, such as primary producers, so for example phytoplankton, secondary producers, perhaps zooplankton, and then they've looked at experiments that have, for example, measured changes in community stability, in production, or nutrient cycling, for example. Now, these plots are relative plots, so it's the ratio of the change in the ecosystem process depending on whether the treatment was a high diversity treatment or a low diversity treatment. So if there is no difference between a high diversity treatment and a low diversity treatment, then we would expect the overall outcomes or our data that we see in these two graphs to sit on the zero line, that dotted line that you see at the bottom. But what we can see in all cases is that the response is always positive. So that means in all cases, in general, what we see is when we have high diversity communities or high diversity treatments, there is a positive increase in whatever the ecosystem process that has been measured actually was. So there's a huge amount of information embedded within that diagram. In panel C, this is a bit simpler to understand. So here on the x-axis we have the number of different genotypes of seagrass. So imagine a bed of seagrass with a number of different genotypes of seagrass mixed amongst that bed. Basically, the greater the number of genotypes, then the higher the seagrass shoot density. So in other words, these higher diversity seagrass beds seem to be able to exploit the maximum number of resources in that particular system, leading to higher seagrass shoot density. Then in panel D, what we have here is our response is copepod egg production, and this is looking at the change in copepod egg production of cultures of copepods when they're reared on different types of diets, whether it's a monoculture, i.e. low diversity, or a mixed diet, i.e. high diversity diet, comprised of a range of different phytoplankton species. And we see that egg production is stimulated when copepods are fed high diversity diets. And then finally in panel E, this is the response of fisheries production. So productivity in catch is shown on the y-axis, log species richness is shown on the x-axis, and basically in more species rich ecosystems, productivity as shown in catches trends to be higher in those circumstances.